So hopefully this gives you all a great preview of the kinds of information that they're looking for when we submit reports. So Addie did a presentation on energy storage at our annual ISC directors events in San Diego in July. So spoiler alert, Dr. Paul and I have seen this presentation. It is spot on for you all in terms of describing a technology and translating it to what you need for ARs. It's also a great example of the power of interval data. We don't get a ton of interval data yet, unfortunately, in Utah, but it is increasing. And it gives you insights on a lot of different opportunities. I think energy storage is one of those marquee opportunities that you'll get to see from Addie's presentation today. So Addie, with that introduction, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Cody, for this opportunity to present again on the energy storage solutions. All right. So as Julie mentioned already, I'm a grad student. I'm doing my PhD at Rutgers. Completed 3 years already. Starting my 4th, and I will share my screen. All right. Hope you can all see the screen. And all right. So again, just to set the stage for today, I don't have 40-minute long presentation with 40 slides, and I don't want to bore everyone with a lot of details that would be interesting, but that's not extremely relevant to the ARs that we write. So this is more driven towards how can we make our recommendations accurate, but not increase a lot of work to write those. Like there is always a graph, there is a trade-off between effort and accuracy. You can put in a lot of effort, do a lot of simulations, and it will give you accurate results. But again, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. So we need an optimal effort to get an optimal accurate result and not have numbers which are just out of this world, and the clients don't appreciate that as well. So the idea is I have 15 or 16 slides. Please feel free to interrupt me if you think I missed a concept or you need more elaboration on a particular concept. So feel free to interrupt me. And the idea is we'll go through the slides, and I'll also go through the SAM software, which I guess many of you would be familiar with, but just to give an idea of how battery modeling can be done there too. All right, so with that, and one last thing, before I forget, I will have a few thumb rules for you, because I really appreciate how much work each one of you put in to write those reports, those long reports with implementation cost, savings, references, making sure everything is on point. So having these thumb rules, I hope help you in cranking these recommendations quickly. All right. So to start off the presentation, I have this news article that I just read today, which was about batteries, electrochemical batteries, I should say, or lithium-ion batteries. And Texas and California, no doubt, are leading US's power sector in the battery pipeline. As you can see, Utah is really in the bottom with the current operating power, but there is hope. Utah is going up in the planned power sector capacity by the end of this year or so. So that's good science, which means that the presentation that I'm going to have now, or batteries that we are talking about in general, is relevant. We are not talking about something that no one cares about. Definitely, this is commercial scale. So this is not a battery bank that is on a industry. It's the utility scale battery bank capacity. So I thought let's start with this interesting news event. Now, when I talk about battery, it's a generic term for energy storage. So as we all know, the majority of energy storage is under pumped hydro, majority portion in the US. And then the rest is split between thermal and batteries. And here battery is electrochemical, or lithium ion in pretty simple terms. And again, lithium ion has different cathodes. So they have lithium ion, Mn, Fe, FePO4, but let's go with lithium ion as the electrochemical batteries, and the thermal storage could be ice, cold water, and then there is compressed air flywheels, very little portion. Now again, another interesting point why are batteries relevant. So this is the person, Sir Stanley Whittingham, who won a Nobel Prize for making the commercial lithium-ion batteries. And he said it takes about 60 to 80 kilowatt hours to make 1 kilowatt hour battery. Talk about that. Talk about the gap that all young engineers like us need to work on once we graduate. How we can get this gap lower to make batteries, much more efficient. This is more high level that it talks about the whole manufacturing processes, how much energy goes into making a battery. So again, an interesting tidbit. So now going more in detail of why should we recommend batteries in our recommendations? And as you know, batteries are energy storage. Why do we need energy storage? It's mainly because there would be peak demand savings. As I will talk about utility rates in a bit, but these are the main points to consider. If a facility has a flat energy rate, just like we have at our homes, usually we are charged on the energy that we consume. I think my last month's bill was, if I remember it right, 150 kilowatt hours. And I was charged some 7 cents or something on it. So $70 a month bill. If I have a battery, it's not going to do anything for me unless I have solar. But if I have just a battery, my energy is going to stay the same. So if there is a flat rate, then technically there are no savings. However, most facilities that you visit either have demand charges or they have seasonal time of use charges. In those cases, there will be savings by having energy storage. So we can either reduce the demand using batteries, or we can use energy when the electricity is cheap, store it in batteries, and then reuse it when the electricity is expensive, usually in the middle of the day. That kind of, okay, another motivation is in the database, and this is public database, if you see the battery recommendations aren't being recommended that often. And this was, once again, another motivation to have this presentation is it was recommended just 60 times since 2019. And the implementation rates are low too. And again, we know there are many factors that go behind implementation rates, but one of the things is if we can have a more detailed recommendation which talks about when to charge a battery, how much to charge a battery, can we size it properly, then these implementation rates can be improved. So I'm going to address 4 nuances in this presentation. The first nuance is, how do I size my battery? And this is where, as Julie was saying, the load data or the electrical interval data or 15-minute data, as we talk about, comes into picture. So I don't know the utilities in Utah, but most of the utilities in New Jersey have electrical interval data available. So most assessments that even we do, we just ask them for the utility data or the interval data, and it's readily available. Some centers I know also have like a form that the client signs on, and then the center can contact utility on the facility's behalf to get this interval data. So some ideas there. Why is the interval data important? Because we need to know when the peak load is happening. So the battery size depends on the energy that it is using and the peak power that it can produce. So power and energy both are important, meaning that kilowatts and kilowatt hours for a battery are important in terms of its cost. So which is why it's important to understand not just the peak, but the length for which the peak is happening, so that we know how much energy the battery needs to store, how big the battery has to be. And in parallel, I have written about ice storage, which usually is with the chiller data. So we need to know when a facility is using chiller for process cooling, and then we can compare it with, can we crank up the chiller to also make ice or cooling water, and then use that ice or cooling water to provide cooling when the electricity is expensive. So to give you an example, this is a typical tabulated data of bills that we see, right? It has kilowatt hours, kilowatts, dollars associated with them, additional charges. This might be reactive power, some fixed charges, and then the total. So looking at just this data, I won't be able to know if this 156 kilowatts in July was for like an hour long. Was it 2 hours that this peak demand happened, or 8 hours? No idea of knowing this. Another interesting point would be, is this facility being charged for the peak demand, or are they charged for demand happening in certain time periods? To give you an example, I can tell you this facility was charged for peak demand no matter when it happens. So in the 24-hour time frame, if it happens at 1 a.m. at night, their peak demand, then they would be charged for that peak. However, there was another facility we visited in upstate New York that had seasonal peak rates, meaning that if the peak happened between noon and 4 p.m., they were charged more than if the same peak happened sometime in the midnight. So they have these kind of time of use rates. Like when you use the electricity, you will be charged accordingly. And then the third facility example is sometimes these time of use rates also apply to kilowatt hours, the energy that we are using. They may not have a flat rate of, let's say, 10 cents a kilowatt hour. It might vary, like 15 cents when the electricity production is expensive during the day, when most of the facilities are using electricity, and it might go down to 8 cents at night. So there might be a difference in kilowatt hour charges too, which again is important to understand when we look at the bills. How are they being charged? So just looking at this data, just looking at this data without the 15-minute or interval data, it's impossible to know how long this kilowatts peak demand is lasting. And then that kind of begs the question, then how do we size the battery? If you ask me, it's very difficult to size the battery in this scenario unless we do a lot of guesstimations. We ask the plant manager, how long do you think your peak lasts? But again, it goes back to adding all these fuzzy factors. One solution is maybe we have our own power meter. We have our own 15-minute data collection device that we install there for 2 weeks, and we measure when does their peak demand happen and how long it lasts. That's a good solution. 2 weeks is good enough time frame to know what the year looks like. If you have heard of value stream maps, the lean folks love it. They don't even do 2 weeks. They do the instance. If I'm there at 11 a.m., whatever inventory I have is what is there for an entire year. That's what value stream map is. It's a snapshot in time, and you streamline your process accordingly. If you're collecting 2 weeks worth of data, that's much better. And the best thing would be to have a load data like this. And this data is, I wanted to show this data because I forgot to scale this, but I scaled the second graph. Imagine that this is also 160 on the y-axis, the bottom right graph. But see, both of them can have the same peak demand of 160. Let's imagine this 700 is 160. And still they can have very different load profiles. Scenario 1 here shows that this peak only lasts for 2 hours. Whereas here, the peak lasts for about 8 hours. Meaning that if I size a battery for, let's say, 160 kilowatts, I need that 160 kilo. Again, it won't be 160. I'll go to that point in a minute. But I want that 160 kilowatts to last for 2 hours to get rid of this peak. Whereas here, I want it to last for 8 hours. So the energy required in scenario B is going to be much higher, meaning that we need a bigger battery. And then the cost will increase, which I won't be able to know if I look just at this data. So my implementation cost will be all over, and it won't make for a good recommendation for the facility. Now, as I was saying, it won't be a 160 kilowatt battery. Why? because the way peak demand works is when I reduce one peak, the facility will be charged for the next peak that comes up. It's not that I'm going from 160 to zero. That's fine. Oops, my bad. I can go from 160 all the way down to zero, but then they still have a peak here sometime at like 11 a.m. or 10 to 12, which is at around 80. So then the facility is not going to be charged $0 for demand, but they're going to be charged for that second peak. So the peak shaving is mainly the difference between the maximum peak and the next maximum peak that we see. So here, if I have to size a battery, I would say that I would buy electricity from the grid up to 80 kilowatts, and then the rest of this energy, rest of this electricity is what my battery would provide. And how is my battery getting power in the first place? Two ways. I can either charge it at night so that it's not affecting my peak demand, whereas imagining this line goes up a little bit. So my peak demand is not increasing. However, my kilowatt hours are increasing because I'm charging my battery, but then the same kilowatt hours I'm using here. So it kind of sums out if again they have a flat kilowatt hour rate. So I'm not increasing any demand charges. I'm charging my battery, and then I'm using my battery here to reduce it from 160 to 80. So I want 80 kilowatts to last for 2 hours. So I would have a 160 kilowatt hour battery. I would multiply that with the implementation rate per kilowatt hour, which is in the next slide, to get an implementation cost. This is very quick or fast calculation that you can do. And the implementation cost that I have here is around $500 per kilowatt hour. I have a lot of references in these slides. I'm more than happy to share these slides. And if we look into SAM software and REOP from NREL, $500 a kilowatt hour is a good estimate for batteries. So for implementation cost. So, when you're on an assessment, if you have these thumb rules in mind, and hopefully before going on an assessment, if you get the electrical interval data, if at all, then you can go to the assessment and have a idea that, we can save X dollars and it would cost so much. All right. Now, in the second case, I'm not saying it's not feasible in the second case. It's just that the economics will shift. Now we want the same 80 kilowatt battery to last for 8 hours. So we need about 640 kilowatt hour battery. So now multiplying that with $500, the cost goes high, but maybe their demand charges are high enough to justify that. And now we do recommend that have big ticket items in your reports. So even if it's 10 or 12-year payback, it can be in the reports, especially with the implementation grants. So saying that, it's not recommended for case 2. However, if we show that our battery sizing is as close to reality as possible, it just increases the chance of getting that recommendation implemented. So here is this reference for the cost per kilowatt hour of battery systems. So once we know how big my system has to be in terms of peak power that it has to provide and how long it has to provide that power for, so the energy and peak power, then we can easily, very quickly calculate how much it's going to cost. And that would give us an idea whether we need to spend time. If it's going to be $1 million project, such a big battery, then it won't be in the recommendation. And then we don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. All right. Moving on, the second and third nuance. So the first nuance was how big the battery has to be and how much energy it has to provide. So kilowatts and kilowatt hours. The next two nuances are when do I charge and discharge the battery, and how much do I charge and discharge the battery. So this again goes back to extremely established research. There has been a lot of research going on in batteries, storage systems, energy storage systems as a whole. And you will see these graphs a lot. So when to charge and discharge? Well, again, it depends on the tariff structure. If they have, I've been saying this a lot, many times now in the past, 25 minutes. But if they have cheaper electricity, charge it then and then discharge it when they have expensive electricity. It's difficult to predict the demand. So we can use the past 1 year worth of data. And the ice we consider free cooling. So when to charge and discharge depends on their electricity rates. Well, if they have a flat rate, then maybe we charge it when their demand periods are low, so that we don't hit the peak demand and not create another peak just for charging our battery. And then how much to charge and discharge. This is again another thumb rule. So the most common values that you will see in any modeling software is this thing called a C value. It might be 0.5 C, 0.25 C. What does it mean? It means that if I have a battery of 80 kilowatt hours, it means that the battery provides 80 kilowatts for 1 hour. That is 1 C. It is just providing the rated power for 1 hour. However, 0.5 C would be, it would be able to provide 40 kilowatts for 2 hours. And the idea is most batteries it's recommended to charge or discharge them not at 1 C. I mean, you can even fast charge and discharge it at 2 C or 3 C. You know, when you sit in a Tesla Model S and just crank that accelerator, just have a lot of power going in a small instance to the tires, and you get what, 3 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour. But that kind of degrades battery life. So it's not recommended to do it a lot, many times. There is this graph of C value versus the number of cycles that the battery lasts. So the idea is that a good thumb rule is 2 to 4 hours of charging and discharging time is necessary for a battery. So going back to this case, 2 hours here is perfect. It's ideal. It can discharge over 8 hours. That's fine. But then we need time here for it to discharge. 8 hours is just saying that I'm going at 0.25 C. That's all good. We can discharge at a lower rate, meaning that I'm just providing energy for a longer time. My battery is bigger. But we can't expect the battery to be charged in 15 minutes. I mean, and if you talk about electric cars, you can charge them very quickly, but that's why they have this whole premium on it. And there is still a limit, 40 minutes to a full charge, or 30 minutes, or whatever that might be. But for lithium ion batteries, this 1 hour, or sorry, 2 hours charging time is necessary. That's another thumb rule to consider. If they have, imagine this load profile being just constant throughout the day and not having enough time to charge the batteries, then it just becomes, the economics becomes difficult. What I'm trying to say is these rules will just help you size the batteries, discharging it in 2 hours, 4 hours. We don't, if there is a peak for just 15 minutes, very, very small peak, we still want the battery to discharge over 1 hour for the capacity that it has. It can still provide 15 minutes to reduce the peak, and then the rest would be just to reduce the usage and then use it back. But this 2 to 4 hours is important. Discharge rate up to 1 C is good. As I said, it can be an hour, but in most softwares, which I'll go to next, we have time. So in most softwares, you will see a default value of 0.5 C. All right, lead acid batteries are even lower. This 0.25 to 0.5 C is mainly for lithium ion batteries. Lead acid batteries, I think it's really low. It's 0.2 or something. It's really low. And the depth of discharge is usually 80%. So we oversize. We cannot completely drain the battery. So we usually size the battery to be 80%. So 80% is useful energy, and the 20% is still left. And then typical ice making duration. So I know I'm speaking a lot on electrochemical batteries, but my goal for today was to spend more time on electrochemical and not a lot on ice storage. But I have some links here that will help with the ice storage calculations. Again, they are well established with big companies. So typical ice making duration is about 8 to 10 hours. So we need to consider those hours. If we have a chiller that's working 24 hours, we need to consider those 8 to 10 hours to make the ice, and then the next hours to use it.
So when he says ice storage, that's a form of thermal energy storage. Are you
Yes.
guys familiar with any thermal energy storage applications?
No,
Or, oh,
yeah, I
I'm
know.
asking our students if that's okay. Oh,
Yeah, I know it. You asked this question. I haven't seen it like firsthand. I don't have a firsthand experience for thermal energy storage as a whole. However, I can definitely say that all these links claim to have done ice storage in real facilities.
yeah.
So,
Well, I'm asking our student team, are any of you guys familiar with an application of chilled water or thermal energy storage? It is. Russell?
Could one of the applications be the geothermal stuff you're doing at the U?
Potentially, yeah. Have you guys ever actually seen thermal storage in action?
Makes me think of the,
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, we actually have an active chilled water thermal energy storage here on campus. So it's right. It's kind of over by the Sorensen Biotechnology building. So there's a big old thermal energy storage tank that we pointed out to you sometime. Anyway,
this reminds me, Cody, of the zoo application from the assessment. Do you want to describe that one really quick of thermal storage?
yeah, we did an AR for Hogle Zoo. They actually for the
Tigers? One of the animals has a cold.
yeah, like the polar bears or something.
Yeah.
They actually have like a little water thing that they chill and keep it like polar-ish temperatures. And so we said, hey, this is thermal energy storage. If you can have a little bit of flexibility in the temperature of that water, then you could like pre-cool it during off-peak hours and then let the temperature drift back up during peak hours. We've actually done, Mohammed's working on one right now for a big refrigerated space at a recent client where they have about a 10-degree gap on temperature in refrigerated space. So we're saying you guys can let that temperature drift up, still staying within the product specs. We have a pretty nice, very safe buffer built in. They can decrease their peak demand cost by doing that without even having to build any new capital equipment. So that's something that we tinker around with quite a bit, Adi, but there is here on our campus, there is an active chilled water thermal energy storage system. So it's technology that has proven to be cost effective. They also have this where I went to graduate school at the University of Texas. I've seen them at like Texas Instrument facilities in Dallas, but it's not super uncommon to do this stuff. Thanks for letting me interject, Adi.
yeah, no, that's perfect. I was gonna say for any questions about thermal energy storage, your director or your professor sitting back there, he's the expert. I've seen, yeah, if you have any, I saw his research. It's a lot on thermal energy storage. So I tend not to speak, but yeah, thanks for interjecting. I got to know something. All right, so yeah, so as I was saying, when to charge and discharge and how much to charge and discharge. That's another important nuance, second and third. So then how much to charge and discharge? If we have to charge it enough to reduce the peak demand, this is a graph for solars. This is again for New Jersey. How much solar can we make? As you know, the common recommendation is to have solar to be 90% of the minimum demand, just to avoid the whole net metering concept. Many utilities may or may not allow that. However, if we have batteries, maybe we increase the size of solar. Maybe we are not limited by that 0.9 of the minimum demand, because now we have to charge the battery too. So maybe we can increase the solar to like a higher capacity, if, of course, their roof or their parking lot allows it. And then use solar during that. Again, the time is very important. This is kind of when the solar is almost at the peak. It's usually here, but we can always oversize the system, charge the battery during that time, and then discharge it to reduce peak even more. So these are all ideas to make a recommendation more accurate and with minimal effort. So So then the last nuanced approach is the efficiency, the round trip efficiency. When we charge the battery and discharge the battery, it's not 100%. It is about 90% for lithium ion. And again, this is highly conservative. If you see the new technologies, you will see like 95% efficiency. There are technologies that claim that, but this is a good conservative estimate to use in the recommendations for charging and discharging when we calculate kilowatt hour savings. Again, depending on the rates. So these were the 4 nuances. Now I want to, we still have, we have 15 minutes. So 5 or 10 minutes, I'll walk through this example and then we'll take questions. And again, you can stop me in between. So just to repeat, electrical interval data is very important to understand when the peak is happening, how long the peak is happening. That will help us in the first nuance, which is how big my battery should be, battery sizing. The second nuance was charging, discharging, and how much to charge and discharge. 2 to 4 hours is a good thumb rule to use. And when to charge, again, depends on the load data. And if you have the, I hope you get the tariff, like how are they being charged? Is it peak demand, seasonal, time of use? And the last one is efficiency, which I think most use in all the recommendations. The efficiency when we consider boilers or chillers, we use efficiency to offset, or because we know the input is going to be higher than the output. All right. So then now, before this questions, what I did was, if you see this example, I have it here. So here I have scaled it to 160. So now if we do a quick math, which I have here, is imagine I have 160 kilowatts and I want to bring it down to 80 kilowatts. These are the 2 scenarios, 160 down to 80. I need a battery that lasts for 2 hours. So I need 160 kilowatt hours. Multiply that by 500 to get the cost of the battery. And then how much are we saving? So I did a quick math for 80 kilowatts a month. Again, it's not 80 a month all the time because sometimes the peak is 120. But if you just consider average of about 65 kilowatts a month times 12, and then I consider times 20 dollars a kilowatt, just as a not random use case, then it comes to around $13,000 in savings. You add solar to it, you will get $28,000 of savings, which so 28 and 13 goes about $40,000 of savings. So that is a ballpark that I can get even before visiting the facility, before doing anything. And then to validate my point, I did the same analysis in SAM. So to walk you through it, if you haven't used SAM, it looks overwhelming at first, but it's pretty straightforward to use. We use the weather data. I used Piscataway in New Jersey. Then I added how big my inverter has to be, or how big my solar system has to be, in system design, which is about, I just considered 200 kilowatts in DC because I want to provide 160 peak plus extra because I want to charge my battery. Then I considered battery cell. So here I considered that I want 80 kilowatts maximum power and 160 kilowatt hours to reduce that, shave the peak. And I just kept everything else just default. And then I added my rates, which is $20 per kilowatt for demand and 10 cents a kilowatt hour, just flat rate of 10 cents. Again, this allows you to add different rates for different times of the day, so on and so forth. And then, very important, I added this electric load profile, which is this array of hourly loads that happen. All right. And then guess the result that I got. I got about $34,000 in savings, and my ballpark was about 40,000. So what I'm trying to say is, again, this is lower because, it's not 65 each month, the peak demand. It's going to change. So the peak demand shaving that you're going to do is change. However, this is a quick ballpark calculation that if we do, we can know if this recommendation can go in the report or not. And the payback is about 10 years. and the rates that they use, the operating costs that they use is about, oh, sorry, my bad. Installation cost is about $500 a kilowatt hour for the battery, which is about here 72,000. So just doing these quick calculations help a lot. And then I also did a similar analysis for this long duration where we wanted the battery to last for a longer time, where it was same 80 kilowatts. The peak that I wanted to shave was the maximum power is still 80, but then I want it to last for 8 hours. So I considered 480 kilowatt hour battery. And then I still got savings, but the payback was about 14 years. So just to showcase that there is still $30,000 in savings. The payback goes high because now the cost is going high. I multiply 500 with the bigger kilowatt hours, and then my payback goes high. But having these calculations, not saying we have to use SAM every time, but just a point that these thumb rules can help you with numbers which are pretty close to having or using a modeling software. And this entire modeling can be done in Excel. Trust me, it's pretty straightforward. It's like when you want to charge and discharge, they use the same 0.5C rates, and it is doable in Excel. Again, I'm not a big fan of black box tools because then as an engineer, I feel like I'm being left in the unknown. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. So if you do it in Excel, you will land up with very close numbers to this. So then why use SAM? Because SAM takes into account different losses that happen, much more chemistry, much more detailed, much more detailed focus to can we charge the battery during 2 hours at night? It runs these optimization programs. And if you see some of these graphs, it is asking to charge the battery at night too. So they're using both the utility and solar to charge the battery. So they're kind of optimizing the peak demand savings versus the increased kilowatt hour cost. So that's why SAM is good. It's a good modeling software. But with Excel, we can get pretty much similar results with low effort. And that is kind of the presentation, just to motivate everyone. Let's start having more battery recommendations or energy storage recommendations, electrochemical and thermal. All right.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes for questions.
Yes. So which means either everyone understood everything or nothing.
So when you're using that SAM software,
Yeah.
are there any particular parameters that you commonly will change or mess with, or that you recommend paying
Yeah.
attention to?
Yeah. So as I said, I change 1, 2, 3, 4 things, 5 things mainly. So the location where you are, the size of the solar panel in system design, which is here, desired array size. I don't change a lot of losses. I think there are many fuzzy factors in there. Just keep it like that. Battery system, this is where the biggest problem happens when we don't know how big the battery has to be. So the load data, we need the load data. So that's the third. Fourth one is rates. If you have a different rate for electricity, 10 cents, 5 cents, whatever that might be, kilowatt hours and kilowatts. And then the load profile. These are the 5 things I usually change. There are many things that we can change. To give an example, in battery dispatch, we can change whether we want the battery to charge from the grid or not. So if I just unselect this, then the savings will be much more close to what we got. So it depends, and it's pretty fast. But those are the 5 things I mainly change.
Thank you.
Great question.
I have a question.
Yep.
What is a
typical payback period for battery that you would recommend?
Yeah, well, so it is high. It might be upwards of like 10 or 12, 10 years. And we can still recommend that in the database or in the reports, because with the hope that if the manufacturer applies for the implementation grants, then it can go down to 5 years. If again it's under 600,000, they can get a cost share from the federal government. But up to 10 years, yes, we can recommend in the database. It is now there's a push to have bigger recommendations in the database. So yes, let's recommend up to 10, 12 years. And I know in some states they have rebates on batteries. Like if you have on-site storage, they have bigger rebates in addition to the federal incentive that you get for solar. I've seen it. I don't remember the state exactly, but so that might get the payback lower, which you can add in incentives. So yeah, 10 to 15 years, all good.
And Jouet and Mohammed are doing research. Particularly, Jouet is showing you can make the economics of a battery or an energy storage system better if it participates in doing multiple things. So like he's showing it can pay off faster if you're doing like peak shaving and participating in like a demand response program.
Right.
The Rocky Mountain Power has a reasonably new demand response program. They pay $100 per kilowatt each year if you're willing to curtail your load like on demand from them. So we're doing active research and figuring out how to make the economics of energy storage systems better.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. It's great research too. Thanks you brought it up, the demand response programs. That's a great point. Many states have this where they might tell you an hour before. I think Tennessee was mentioning this. Yes, that they might tell you an hour before that you need to shave your demand by so, and they give you rebate for if you're like in that program. So it's perfect.
Patty, do you have a sense of how many, if any, energy storage projects have received IAC grant funding?
Good question. No, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but I know that the data is public, so we can go on the EnergyWorks website to know, but I don't know.
Other questions? Alan, do you feel ready to do an energy storage AR based off of this presentation?
Yeah, I think it was an amazing presentation.
How about you, Aiden?
Yeah, pretty good.
Ready to roll? Okay,
Right.
Matt.
One last question. So when
Yeah.
you go to assessment, what are you looking for from the facility to say, oh, this is a good, strong candidate for storage system, or maybe this candidate isn't as well, or as well fitted for that?
Right. So peaky demand, that's the first big thing. The graph should be peaky. Second, they should have high demand charges. Some facilities may not have high demand charges. So peaky demand, high demand charges. And then the third thing is it's always recommended to understand that their peak is happening because of a process that's irreplaceable or like immovable, whatever the the adverb is. So the first goal is if they have 50 machines and they are turning on all 50 machines at 8 a.m. in the morning, the first recommendation would be, can you stagger the startup? Is it possible to start machines at 8 and then 8:15, 9 o'clock? Depending on their peak demand, it's either 15 minutes or 30 minutes that their peak is being charged for. So that's the first recommendation. But sometimes facility can come up and say that, no, we cannot do that because, there are operator problems or whatever that's happening. Then batteries would make the most sense. Where I can give an example of injection molding machines. So injection molders have this heating element that goes to heat it needs initial heating of the die and the resin. And then they turn off the heating after they reach a certain temperature. We visited a facility and all 50 machines, the heaters, the electric resistance heaters were coming on at the same time. So we asked them, do you need it? And then they would go down. So it's like a peaky demand, and then it goes down because there is the heaters come off. So we asked, can you stagger? They said no. Then the next was, can we use a battery to reduce your peak? So three things.
It's a great question, Matt. I'll just add really quick for Rocky Mountain Power context. My first request would be interval data. Rocky Mountain Power is in the process of transitioning all utility meters to smart meters, which will give us that utility data. The bigger customers are getting it first. The customers of our size are getting it a little bit later, but it is happening. So more routinely in our assessments, asking about that interval data access is top of mind for this.
Awesome.
Awesome. Hey, team, just for context, Addy at Rutgers is at 7:30 p.m. So he's giving us his Eastern time, evening time. So let's give him one more round of applause.
Thank you.
Peace so much, Addy. We'll talk
Thank
to
you,
you
Addie.
soon.
That was great.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thanks for
night.
the opportunity. Bye. Talk to you guys soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.